Oki, Nitsiskonakii, Natokinamayi. I come from Gaina blood tribe, southern Alberta, Blackfoot Confederacy. That's my father's side of my family. My grandmother, from my mother's side, is from Nitsiskonakii, Northwest Territories, and I also have, a bit of settler in my blood, and even like some Chinese, which is crazy. I was born and raised in Nitsiskonakii, Calgary. Kind of like a city urban Indian, but I spent a lot of time on the reserve as well.
What does an urban Indian mean?
To me, it's just an Indian who grew up in a city, who has that type of life experience in the urban areas, in the streets. Really, I want to say, because that's what it is, really, right on the concrete. It's out on the land, which I'm trying to get back to, heal myself, because those streets caused me a lot of harm, and that's kind of my experience of growing up in the city. I see a lot of our relatives that are lost. They struggle with identity. They seek it out. That's what I did too, growing up. I was looking for my identity in other places. When I just had to remember and get back to who I was, really.
How'd you find your identity?
Life experience. Just for a long time, I didn't know who I was. I grew up. I spent some time, in the foster care system due to, my family and trauma that we dealt with. But I was raised by my parents, luckily, because they did what they had to do in order to get us back. And for a long time, I didn't accept some of the things I did, some of the things that I was. But I'm at a point in my life now where I am accepting those parts, and I'm realizing that it's part of me. They talk about we got two wolves on our shoulders, right? The white one, and there's the black one. One's ego and fear. One's soul and love. Even though these parts of me have caused some harm along the way, I still gotta love those parts. That's where I'm at in terms of my recovery. I consider myself. We're all colonized, and I'm just trying to decolonize, re-indigenize.
So who would you say that you are now?
Nitsiskonakii, one shot. I earned that name on the front line. I brought it back home. My grandpa, in ceremony, gave it to me, and that's who I am today. And I'm a Red Seal iron worker by trade, but also a land defender, water protector, advocate, activist. But really, these are just labels. I'm Nitsiskonakii, which means the original people, human being. That's what I am.
What does it mean to be a land and water protector?
It means showing up and living up to your obligations and responsibilities as a human being, as a spiritual person, living a human experience. These trees here have spirit, the water has spirit, and because our relatives, some of them, the newcomers, they're lost and they don't see it. They see everything as a commodity. There's a lot of trauma that's happening on the lands. There's a lot of trauma that happens in order for those cities to pop up. Currently on Treaty 7 territory, and it's really living up to those treaty agreements that especially for an Nitsiskonakii person, I want to honor my ancestors and what their true intent was for treaty. That was to share these lands. It was never a surrender. It was never a ceded. It was always about sharing the land with each other, so we could all thrive and prosper.
What do you wish non-Indigenous knew about the Nitsiskonakii?
I was told that I should always know. That's why are we, who are we, and where are we going? And if they could answer those three questions themselves, they would know us. Because at the end of the day, we're spirit just like them. So But really, I wish they could see the beauty in my people, Nitsiskonakii, the Blackfoot Confederacy.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Blackfoot Confederacy?
Yeah, the Blackfoot Confederacy, there's 4 bands that represent them. I'm from Gaina Blood Tribe, which is, by Lethbridge, Pincher Creek area, southern Alberta. There's the Nitsiskonakii, they're, east of Calgary there. There's the Piikani, which is closer to Pincher Creek. But then there's the Amskapi Piikani. They're south of the Medicine Line, across the border there in the States, Montana. And 4 of those represent the Blackfoot Confederacy. And even though they got the Tsuut'ina, they signed treaty with us, and the Stoney as well. They signed treaty with us as well, but traditionally, all the way up to Edmonton, to the Rocky Mountains, all the way, even to Saskatchewan, and all the way down into the States, it was all Blackfoot territory. That's what I was taught.
Thank you. Could you tell me a little bit about your work as a frontline worker?
Yeah, so the front line is everywhere. I like to say that. It's in the cities, Mohkinstis, you travel around from city to city, whether in Vancouver or Toronto. You go to the States, LA, you come back up here, Prince George, Edmonton, Calgary. You notice there's a huge homeless population. There is a lot of non-Indigenous that are homeless as well, but a majority of them are Indigenous. And they're not homeless, they're houseless. They're oppressed and displaced from their land. And, it's that's one aspect of a front line. Another front line would be in Wet'suwet'en, Gidimt'en clan, where they're fighting against CGL. Another one would be, Winnipeg, where they're searching the landfills for, their missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit. Everywhere in my eye is a front line. If you're an Indigenous person, or even if you're a non-Indigenous person, we suffer, I call colonization a spiritual sickness. If you were spiritually sound, if you had a solid foundation in spirit, you wouldn't be seeing this tree that we see as a commodity. You'd see it for what it is, which is spirit. It's listening to us right now. I'm grateful to be here and even to have these trees with us. And so that's what I see as a front line. It could be anywhere.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about your music?
Yeah. Main goal with my music is to inspire, especially our youth. I grew up. I lost a brother. He was 18. Even myself, I was caught up in some low vibrational behavior growing up. I still have a few brothers who are out in those streets in Mohkinstis. And the main goal for me with my music is to inspire them to become the warriors that they were born to be. A lot of us get caught in distraction due to colonialism. It's all part of the process of colonialism. They want to keep you so disconnected from your spirit that you yourself become a commodity. And so my goal is to inspire, educate, and just bring a level of awareness to even non-Indigenous people who need to hear the truth. Really, it's to bring truth into the light with my music. That's what my main goal is.
How long have you been making music?
COVID. So I guess going on 4 years now. It's also when I stopped drinking alcohol was during COVID time, and I tried to really take a look at myself and change the course of my life and heal, recover.
Do you have a mentor?
I have many mentors. Of course, the creator is the biggest one. My parents, my older brothers, my older sisters. I've during my when I started to recover from, because I don't call myself an alcoholic. I don't call myself any of these things. I do call myself a colonized Indian. So when I started to decolonize my mind, body, and spirit, I reached out because there was a lot of people who I looked up to. Cowboy Smith, X. There's another good brother of mine. His name's Jacob Potts. There's authors out there, Richard Wagamese, Thomas King. There's, of course, my my grandparents, I've been learning Blackfoot language from Monica Chief Moon. Many elders out there in the Blackfoot Confederacy who I look up to, and those would be my mentors. Those are the ones that I'm trying to really, learn from, and gain that ancestral wisdom from, and knowledge, because that's what we need. We need to regain that, and move forward like that in a good way, because for thousands of years it kept us alive. Being on the front line, there's many other ones: Slato, Kanahus, there's Chief, Was, Chief Namuks. There's so many out there. Chokden, he was a warrior that I met out on the front line too, and all these people I look up to, all these people I want to be like, all these people that I want to honor and respect them and what they taught me, and that's really the main goal. In terms of, there's also another brother of mine, he's Amskapi Pikani, his name's Yaz. These are guys that, even there's so many, Brett Lee, I make music with him. Yeah, there's so many brothers of mine that, at one point I remember seeing them and what they were doing, and I was like, I want to be like you guys. I was very disconnected and lost. I was still looking for my own identity, and just in the process, they went from mentors to brothers to, now they're like, I consider them straight relatives, and I would do anything for them.
Do you have favorite songs that you've made?
It's a hard question, because all my music, I put a lot into them. I wrote all my music substance free, and so, but really, one that really sticks out to me is Rise. The original naming of that one was Indigenous Rise. In terms of, that's what I see in the world right now. I see a lot of our relatives doing really well in that aspect. But in this track Rise, the goal was to inspire warriors to show up to front lines, whether that's in Calgary, doing harm reduction, community outreach to our relatives, or whether that's out in the bush where there's illegal projects being forced onto Indigenous lands, through Indigenous lands, by the colonial government, right? So I would highly recommend a lot of the youth, try to listen, don't just bob your head to the beat. Listen to what I'm saying. Hold me accountable to it. Hold yourselves accountable to it. Because we all have obligations, whether you're a treaty person or, you're in BC as a non-treaty person. But, that's what that's what my goal is with my music as well.
Would you say that's also the most impactful song you've made?
Unseated is one of them. That one's a heavy one. As peoples, you got to consider yourself in that sense too, as you got to be unseated. You got to be a sovereign being. There's a lot of distraction in this world that tries to keep us from our path. Social media, substances. But the basis of it all is, you have to stay focused and disciplined and committed to why you came to this earth. Your spirit knew everything that was going to happen. You chose your parents, you chose all the experience that you've gone through, good or bad. Some of us get caught in the bad and we, lose focus. Our warriors, with the AIM movement, Russell Means, John Trudell, all those guys, because, John Trudell talks about we're all like a single raindrop. And once each raindrop becomes clear and coherent, we become the power of the storm. And, that's my goal, is to become clear and coherent, and also inspire others to become clear and coherent, so that this spiritual sickness that we're all facing, in terms of colonization, it's impacted every corner of the world. So there's a spiritual warfare that's happening that, people are disconnected from, and they don't really understand it or aware of it. A lot of what I do is to try and be of service, bring unity and recovery into any type of space that I see myself in. And mostly it's a front line. Mostly it's dealing with the impacts of colonialism. And moving forward, I actually want to get back to school. Yeah, but there is no they in terms of them, in terms of like, it's just us as human beings on this earth. There's so much, they try to divide and conquer. And, but really, we're all one, we're all human beings. We're all here for, a higher purpose. And that's it's not for us, it's for the 7 generations to come. We got to honor our ancestors and our descendants. There's a lot of that spiritual sickness can come in terms of greed, hatred, unhealed trauma. That's what it really is, comes down to, is even the Europeans, they were traumatized, they were oppressed. And then, they didn't have the tools, the medicines in order to heal themselves. And they made their way over to this side of the world and just continued that cycle of trauma intergenerationally.
How can non-Indigenous better hold space for Indigenous advocates?
Externally show up to front lines, internally do your work, that would bring you to a place where when you do show up your actual service, and to the people who are facing this oppression, just, you know what I mean, just help liberate all of us as human beings by looking within. And because once you do that, everything else externally will just follow, right? Starts in spirit, with that spiritual sickness that I talk about so much. Mind and body will follow. In the society, people, they talk about go to the gym, they work on that. There's therapies out there where you can work on your mind, and that's so important as well. But then, they still continue to move forward in life, causing a lot of harm because that spiritual sickness was never addressed. And I've experienced it, I've lived it, I've caused it. And I don't. I'm at a point in my life now where I can't. It's life or death for me. Where I want to be a part of colonization. I want to be a solution to this sickness. I want to be of service to Creator, to people, non-Indigenous and Indigenous, and try to bring that unity. Because we need community. That's how we survive. In society, they want you individual. It's an individualistic society where they, want you to get your money. There was a point where all my relatives were all paying separate rent in the city of Nitsiskonakii. There was like 7 of us all paying our separate rents. And I was like, damn, the colonizers really got us. But I had to heal. I started to heal myself, and I started to see my family heal. I started to see my community heal. I started to see my nation heal. I started to see, the country heal, and I'm starting to see, these continents and even the world healing in a way that, I never seen growing up, when there was so much illusion and distraction. We're in a shift. We're in a paradigm shift. I know it. I feel it. And the future is Indigenous. The future is beautiful. Not like, we've been in a winter, they call it, for the past, 500 years since colonization hit this land.
How has the community here in Nitsiskonakii received your music and your frontline work?
If they have a understanding and awareness of what we're dealing with as human beings, as peoples, they love it. It brings them to tears. Makes them think. It's healing. Especially, with the advocacy work, with our relatives on the streets. I see them weekly, week in, week out. The same faces sometimes. Sometimes it's not, and I worry about the ones I don't see for a while. But it's just, a lot of healing, a lot of tears, a lot of, because, crying is a gift. That's what my mom told me. A gift from Creator. And if you're able to cry, you're able to release. And, you can feel that space. Because it's usually like, sadness. It can be anger, which is, just deep sadness. And, to heal is to cry. It's to release what you've been holding on to when you couldn't let it go or express it. And otherwise, I get messages where it's like a paragraph of how it made them feel. And it inspires me to keep going because, at times I get stuck in self-doubt. A lot of my music is kind of underground. It's kind of, it's not in the mainstream. So sometimes I'm like, well, is anybody even listening? Do they hear what I'm saying? Are they even connected enough to know what I'm saying? And every once in a while I get a message from someone and it hits so hard that, it just makes me think like, damn, I gotta keep going. I gotta stay on my disciplines, my daily disciplines, in order to, really be of service to them through whether I'm expressing myself or showing up to a front line in a good, truthful, honest, respectful, humble way. Because everything that I'm talking about right now, it was taught and given to me. And my only goal is to teach and give it away from the elders that, spoke to me, and just from life experience that I had growing up. I've never really had any type of negative reactions to that type of work, which is good to see.
Do you have any advice for any new artists?
Yeah, believe in yourself. Don't give up. Keep going. In terms of like artists or anybody, in terms of what you're gonna do, like music or not, anything, it's gonna be cringe at first. For me, it was, but once you just like continue to believe in yourself, move forward, trust Creator, trust the process. No one's perfect at first, and you'll never be perfect, but just don't give up on yourself, and really trust Creator and your ancestors. And if you have a passion, keep going, keep feeding your spirit. Take care of your mind. Take care of your body. Everything that we are consuming plays a huge part in how you show up for yourself and your community, and how you show up in your art, in your creative process, in your flow state. That flow state is like something else when I get to writing music, when I'm self-expressing myself. That's like the purest form of love. When you can get there and stay there and, maintain that, stay consistent. That's like a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful place to be. I feel bad for our ones that are so lost in trauma that they can't experience that for themselves. So for the ones that are taking the steps in order to express themselves in any type of way, just keep going. I started dancing traditional recently, and for a long time I didn't dance because of what happened to me at school. There was a group of kids. I was heavily bullied growing up, being a proud young Indigenous man. Even though I didn't have an identity of that, I always stood up for myself and kept myself grounded in different ways at the time. I was a pretty outgoing child, outspoken, and but there was a time where I was talking to this girl, and I was kind of walking backwards, and she was following me, right? And there was a group of kids right here that didn't really like me or what I caused. Maybe they liked the girl that I was talking to. And we were kind of just like flirting, and I was walking backwards, and I bumped into the group, like 5 or 6 of them. And I looked back, and in school at the time, there was like this documentary of Plains Indians. And so they all started circling around me, pretending they had drums, and they're like saying like buffalo, buffalo, buffalo. It was a really embarrassing moment for me. I remember going home, not finishing the day, but this was in junior high. Because I grew up going to, my mom made it known that she wanted us to have parts of our culture. I went to Doy's Family School, which was an Indigenous school. Bitoyas means Eagle Lodge. Eagle Lodge School is where I went to growing up, but for grade 6 all the way up, I went to, public schools and stuff, and That's when I really seen the racism and, the stereotypes that were put on us as Indigenous people from newcomers, just people who didn't know us. This group specifically was not Caucasian, but one thing I always know is that the colonizers seen us a certain way, and with the new immigrants that enter this country, they teach them to teach us that way. And I learned that growing up. I had a lot of, opposition in terms of that, which, kept me in shame for like a long time. And I actually stopped dancing around that time, grass dance, because of how, being a city Indian growing up with, struggling to find my identity. And then on top of that, being bullied so much that, I was like, I really tried to seek and try to be like, like the newcomers in ways of, I was colonized and allowed that pain to kind of like, keep me off course for a bit. I really wish that, looking back, that I didn't stop ever, that I never let these things get to me. But again, I didn't have the tools. And also growing up in the household, my parents struggled, with these things as well. And, there was the times, where I felt like there was no one to talk to. Even though, my mom went straight to the school that day and was yelling around like, our Indigenous women do, so protective. My big mama bear was coming out to protect her cubs, right? So she was always there for me. I always had a roof over my head and I was always fed. Sometimes she didn't eat, but she always took care of me. My stepfather and my father as well, they did their best with what they had at the time. With the traditional dancing that I've done this year, it really meant a lot to me to be back out there, to be one with the drum, one with the heartbeat of Mother Earth. I wish, my brother, I have one blood brother, everyone else I consider brothers as well, but I have one brother, same mom, same dad. I hope to see this growth in him, because he protected me a lot growing up from a lot of trauma, but he faced it head on. He's 18 months older than me. The big thing I wish is that he takes the steps needed in order to, learn our language and, learn our culture, because sometimes I feel like he's still, kind of like pushing away from it and he's still kind of stuck in that shame that we had growing up. I'm hoping to, just try and inspire him heavily.
Do you have any advice for anyone else reconnecting to their culture?
Yeah, just live your life. Nobody's, it doesn't matter what people tell you. If you're not ready for something, you'll never try to seek it out yourself. What I've learned is you have to be ready. And at the end of the day, Creator has a plan for you. Creator already knows the worst things you've done, the best things you've done. Creator knows the day you're going to die. Creator knows when you were born. It was all set in motion already. So, really, I would say, just believe in yourself and try to, if there's things that you feel you're missing, really try to take a good look at yourself. If you can answer those 3 questions that I mentioned earlier, why are you, who are you, and where are you going? As a person reconnecting and trying to reconnect, answer those questions for yourself, and everything else will just fall in line, really. It does come down to your spirit. Work on your spirit. Call your spirit back. If you don't know how to call your spirit back, it's just say your name. For me, I say my Indian name, Nitsiskonakii. Gih. Let's go. That's what that means. Gih. It doesn't matter. I travel so much in this van that sometimes, my spirit, especially when, I say if I'm arrested or the cops take me into these holding cells or these places where, there's no spirit. Sometimes that's what it feels like. My spirit can get caught up in places and lost. And if I don't actively call my spirit back every day when I smudge or every day when I pray, I could end up just as lost and disconnected. And that's, what usually happens to a lot of us. We don't know these simple things of how to call our spirits back. So, just call your spirit back. It's there.
Can you tell me a little bit about your sobriety journey?
Yeah. My sobriety journey, I was raised with suffering parents that suffered from colonization. I didn't have the tools at the time in order to heal and recover from colonization. I stopped drinking alcohol in 2020, January 24th, 2020. That's my birthday. It's the day that I was born. It's kind of cool that, I had my last drop of alcohol that day. So now they say in your sobriety journey it's 'cause it's a birthday, so I'm like 4 years old now. I'm going on 5 in that aspect, but also when I stopped drinking alcohol, I doubled up on the use of like marijuana. And these things weren't the problem. Alcohol was never the problem. Weed was never the problem. They were the solution for the longest time. Growing up, I had sports. I played every single sport that there was to mention. And I was playing soccer, and I tore my ACL when I was like 16. And then I didn't have that outlet anymore. And I fell into the streets. I graduated at 17. I was younger than everybody else. And, I had surgery on my knee. I tried to continue in sports for a while, and I just kept on injuring my knee. I kept on injuring myself. And I was like, okay, well, I got to do something here in terms of I got out of school. Kind of got into the rough group of kids. And, I fell into a lot of the negative aspects of what I want to say these societies can bring. I fell into the street life, which a lot of my relatives do, which a lot of my brothers do, sisters. I was there for, maybe about a year or two, maybe not even, but, that caused a lot of trauma too in terms of the things that I witnessed and the things that I seen. I lost a lot of friends that were, murdered. That, I lost them spiritually in terms of, they fell into addictions, heavy addictions. And then I remember my good brother, he got shot and he died. Eventually, a few years later, he had a bullet lodged in his spine. And he survived for, a few years later. But in the initial time when he got shot, I remember that's what really kind of like smartened me up. Because there was times where I was shot at too. And living in Mohkin's just, that happens, right? Living in these cities, that's what happens. I'm grateful to be here, to be alive. But I remember my dad, who's an iron worker, said, you better smarten up. You're losing your friends by the numbers, A lot of them are going to jail. A lot of them are dying. A lot of them are getting addicted. You need to change. And he told me, come to work. And I did. So I started tying rebar. Started to follow that path. And I've been doing that for 10 years. I got my red seal in that trade. But even in that trade, there's a lot of men that struggle with addictions, substance use, and they, even for me, like I would smoke. I smoked through my whole career. I would smoke before I went to work. I would smoke, at the breaks, at the lunches, right after. You know what I mean? I was just always using that to cope with life, with the colonial life. Because in this society, you need the money to survive, right? I didn't understand that was me hunting. I didn't understand that, the buffalo were gone. And now in order to feed myself and my family, I need that money. And that's me hunting is, up on that rack up there, I have my work belt and work clothes with me. And in the means of, if there's ever work out there, then I could just reach out to whoever I need to and, make the money that I need sustain myself in terms of traveling, and in that trade I sustained myself. I saved up enough money in order to get myself to these front lines, you know. But I wasted a lot of money trying to cope. I wasted a lot of money. You know, I used to hate money, and I used to think that it was like an evil thing. I thought it was a greedy thing. But I know it's a resource now. And in that aspect, you know, I use it for exactly that. I realized that I was suffering. I kept myself in a position to suffer by using these things to cope and never really actually healing. You know, I used to think that weed was a medicine, you know, which it is, which it can be. For me, you know, I used it as such, but you know, when you're using it that much, it's no longer a medicine. It's part of the sickness. It's part of the coping mechanism that I've used in colonization, and then, you know, in the last 4 years, you know, not even, because I was in Bear Clan. I would say 7 years or so. You know, I was doing Bear Clan. I'm 27 now. But Bear Clan Patrol, Bear Claw in Edmonton. My auntie, she goes by Mamacita. She taught me a lot. She taught me how to give. She taught me that we have two arms, one to receive and one to give. You know, two legs to keep us on the right path, the red road. And in part of my, you know, journey with sobriety, it led me to getting clear and coherent in a way that I was able to show up to these front lines as myself, boots on the ground, that type of work, that type of aspect. Because, you know, money's great and all if you use it right, if you use it as a resource. But at the same time, you can't eat money. And, you know, one day, hopefully, this day never comes, but we come to a place where, you know, that saying where, you know, when the last fish is gone and the last river's dried up, the last tree's gone, you're going to realize that you can't eat money. I pray the Creator that day never comes, because our people will suffer heavily when that day comes. The people, doesn't matter who you are at that point. And we're in a time now where, you know, our rivers are drying up. They're poisoned too, with the black snakes, these pipelines that are forced across indigenous lands. You know, with the Wet'suwet'en, there's the Wet'suwet'en up there. They drink from their river. But now there's a pipeline that went CGL forced underneath. And the amount of like disruption that causes the ecosystem is we won't even know, right? Like, but you know, it just comes down to that spiritual sickness, and what sobriety is you're recovering from that spiritual sickness. Because it all based in trauma. You guys, I learned this from Gabor Mate. Trauma causes a wound. The wound causes disconnection, and we seek connection through, could be working, could be substances. You know, some men are womanizers. They use women to cope. They use these things, these you know, like, it's just a disconnection from spirit. And once you're disconnected from spirit, it's like a hungry ghost. There's a hole in the chest. They seek to fill that hole with money, with drugs, substances, materialistic things. But you know, these things, they never fulfill that emptiness within. The only thing that will fill it is working on the spirit and healing it from within, because, you know, that's colonization, is that hungry ghost energy, that trickster energy. That's why we had ceremonies on this land. That's why our people were so prayerful. That's why they were so spiritual, is because those ceremonies kept that trickster energy down. Even like we call alcohol, napioki, which means trickster water. And you know, if you put these things, you put these spirits into your body, you know, there's harder drugs out there that, even, you know, they do so much worse. It affects your mind, it affects every cell in your body. You know, it comes down to what you're consuming. Whether it's media, propaganda, you know, like, even education. That's why education is so important. When those kids were dancing around me and bullying me in school, if they were educated on the beauty of our people, they wouldn't be treating me like that. They wouldn't be treating our youth like that. Because our people are beautiful. They were scientists. They had everything down to a science, whether it was the stars, whether it was what they're eating. You know, everything was spiritual. Everything was, they had Creator and prayer before they did anything. So my sobriety journey is, learning how to be spiritual. I'm doing programs. I'm doing it through, these anonymous programs in terms of learning how to truthfully be spiritual, because now I have the tools. Because we were talking about the wolves earlier. There's a black wolf here, a white wolf here, and these things can be ego, prejudices, resentment, shame. That's what leads people to suffer the way that they do. And all these things are based in fear. Once you're able to see that, and once you're able to get rid of the fear and fill that fear instead with love, like I was saying earlier, then you can see clearly. Then you will consume clearly, express clearly, live clearly, because this life is an honest, truthful gift from the Creator. It breaks my heart that there's so many people, so many of our people, Indigenous or not, that suffer out there with this spiritual sickness. For a long time, I was trying to change things externally. I wanted people to change, places to change, and things to change. I didn't accept these things. I'm learning to accept these things. I'm learning to accept colonization, as heavy as that can be, because I understand that in my active addictions, in my spiritual malady, in my spiritual sickness and illness, I was doing my own bit of colonizing. And I'm learning to put these principles that I've learned, it comes down to like the 7 grandfather teachings. I'm learning to put that before personalities and opinions. I'm learning that, everything comes from within, everything starts within, and it's that spirit and that mind and body will follow. I'm learning to recover in those ways because I need to be of service to Creator and to all of creation and relation, instead of being an active part of the problem, creating my own type of colonizing, living in anger, resent, fear, shame. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's not about me. It's about the 7 generations to come. And how can I really serve those 7 generations to come? How can I really serve the land, the waters, and the people, and the animals, the 4-legged, the winged? And that's why working on spirit and seeing things for what it is in a clear, coherent way. That's sobriety and recovery to me. Is to live in and see and act and be love. Colonization is just fear. When our people, we were all about love and acceptance. It didn't matter the color of your skin. For a long time I was so angry. I let these things consume me. And I caused a lot of harm myself. In my experience, it's life or death. I'm at a point now where I have to stay disciplined and consistent in my active recovery. Otherwise, I can't be like them, the colonizers. I was brutalized on the 9th of January this year, and the same cop that brutalized me, he's been charged and convicted in court 4 times for abusing and assaulting Indigenous peoples. How do you maintain the position that you're in when you've been charged and convicted 4 times? If I was charged and convicted 4 times for assaulting people, I'd be locked up and throw away the key. But hey, that's colonization. That's when you were in a system of oppression, systematically against people who look like me and you. But I hold no anger against this man. I used to, especially in times when I'd be kidnapped on these front lines, catch and release, arrest, but really it's kidnapping. And it's harassment and intimidation, and that's what they deal with on these front lines in Wet'suwet'en and Gidimt'en clan daily on their own land. They're just trying to protect spirit. You know, on the front line, there was times where I was getting arrested, and I always try to keep tobacco on me. And I remember sprinkling tobacco on their toes, telling them that I loved them, telling them that, you know, I don't hold any type of anger towards them because I know that they're just lost, that their spirit's lost, that they're fully disconnected from Creator and from Source, that they think that what they're doing is just a job and that it's okay, when in reality, you know, people who act and do those type of things, that live in hate. There was a quote that I seen the other day, and it was like, hell is just the inability to love. You know, our people didn't believe in heaven and hell. They knew that once you die, you went to the spirit realm, and it was all love and beauty and peace and true liberation. But in these systems, in this society, especially through colonization, you know, people create their own hell when they can't love themselves or each other. Because this man that brutalized me, you know, we treat strangers sometimes better than we treat the ones we love, the ones that are closest to us, because we're comfortable with them. So if he's able to treat a stranger the way that he treated me, he told me I'll see you in hell, and I laughed at him. I said, no, because I love you. Imagine how he treats himself in his mind. Imagine how he treats his wife and his kids. There's a high rate of suicide among police officers and domestic abuse. And I don't wish any more for that on this man. I don't wish any more for that on these hungry ghosts. That's what I call them, the colonizers, who are a continuation of harm against spirit. Tell them that they're going to walk an eternity of darkness for what they're doing to the land and to the people that they're causing this harm to, because they already are in the ways when they wake up. You know, the oppressed feel it. They see it. They live it. The oppressors are no different. They see it. They feel it. They live it. This man, I know that what I told him is stuck with him. I know that, you know, he's suffering as well. So, you know, I just try to love them even when they don't love us, you know, because I think MLK, he talks about, you know, you can't defeat hate with hate. It's only love that can do that, you know. John Trudell, he talks about how we can't have hate for those who have no sense, but we can always love, you know. We can always give love, you know. You get the same feeling when you receive something that you do when you give something. The only thing is you can't choose when you receive stuff, but you can always choose when you give stuff. That's why I roll with these outreach programs like Bear Claw in Edmonton, Bear Clan in other cities, because the feeling I get when I see my relatives light up and I'm giving them, you know, the basic necessities that these systems take from them, you know, it's something that like really fills my spirit. I feed spirit in that aspect. I feed spirit when I make offerings to the land. At the end of the day, you know, I'm just trying to take care of spirit. I always wonder what spirit sees in these cities. Out here, spirit is beautiful. You hear these birds, you see these trees. There's other animals. I was driving out and I seen probably was like an elk. He was walking along the road. Someone was turning left and they were going slow and just taking their time with it. But you know, spirit out here is healthy. You know, it's my end goal is to make it back to the land. You know, we all have a choice of how we get back to the land. There was one time when I went on a solo hike, backcountry hike, and I slept out there alone. This was in my early recovery. And, I really wanted to connect to myself, to learn about myself, to see what I could do, what I could take. And it was in the middle of winter. It was January 10th, 2021. But yeah, in terms of like returning to the land, it's up to us how we do it. For me, I want to do it in life, not in death. In the day this flesh is going to go back to the earth, become dust and dirt. My real goal is to, get back to the land and become a true Nitsiskonakii, to become a human being, not a spiritually sick, hungry ghost, living in excess, living in comfort. I really, in that time when I was sitting there in the winter on my solo hike and solo trip, I went to Kananaskis. It was like a 7K hike out, and then I camped out. My mom and my brother were worried about me, so they walked out with me with their dog. Uh, Her name's Gertrude is the name. It's a funny name. She's a Cane Corso pit bull.
That's a big dog.
Yeah, she's solid to have around, to protect in terms of bears or whatever. She always has a pretty loud bark. They hiked out with me, and the sun was going down, and they helped me gather, just to start a fire, just enough wood to start a fire. And then I got that fire going, and then and they headed out. And I said, I'll see you in a day or two, and I'll be okay. And I stayed out there for the night. It all came from the idea that because earlier, I think it was 2 weeks earlier or a week earlier, my wife and her sister and I were winter camping by northern Alberta, like Abraham Lake area, Abraham Lake was a man-made lake from the North Saskatchewan River that was dammed. Which I don't agree with that type of colonial need to control waterways, systems, just spirit in general, right? But I went out and camped, set up camp for myself, and I was sleeping in a hammock. But really what I'm trying to say is, we all have a choice every day when we wake up to either honor, that ancestral wisdom that kept us alive for thousands of years, or to continue, being and seeking and living in comfort that was, that really it's false comfort when I think about it. There's definitely, ways that, we can adapt and, use these things to our advantage in terms of the technology that is there nowadays. But it's the ancestral wisdom that will keep us alive moving forward. Chilton's an old warrior that I was, fighting with on the front line. This front line was Pachidat, Dididat territory on the island, where, now at the time there was 2.1% ancient growth forest left. Now there's probably, a lot less. He told me that, like, you see this line that goes across the van right there? For thousands of years it went straight. And colonization is just a little, on this land at least, is just a little blimp. But this is, and this always will be Indigenous land, and we will get back to that straight line of honoring 7 generations and past. Otherwise, this earth is going to get rid of us in terms of, the climate disasters that we've already facing every summer here that's covered in smoke from BC fires. And, I'm not worried about it. As Indigenous peoples, we've already survived apocalypse. Just bring it on, But what I will say is return to spirit. Otherwise, you're not going to survive either. Treaty 7 was signed in September 22nd, 1877 in Blackfoot Crossing, Nitsiskonakii. And, the true spirit and intent that our ancestors had was to share the land. At the time we outnumbered them, we were not ever conquered. there was a lot of interpretation that was misunderstood. There's even interpreters, I think his name is James Bird, on his deathbed. He was an interpreter at Treaty 7. He said that he lied to, try to get the colonizers to, to get what they were seeking, which was title over land which they don't have. They will never have. Our chiefs who signed treaty, they were all men. When our societies were like, our women are a huge part of it. And so, if we're going to talk about treaty, truth and reconciliation, and land back, it's all kind of like wrapped up in the same aspect in my mind. Truth and reconciliation, there has to be truth first. Our ancestors would never sign away the territory that sustained them. At the time, I think, at Treaty 7, there was $50,000 that was handed out. That number is not even, because the land's priceless. You can't sell what you don't own. We never said we owned the land. It was never sold. It was never ceded. It was never surrendered. Another thing about treaty is they showed up with a pre-written document. These fork-tongued, hungry ghosts always had an agenda in mind. In 1877, our chiefs signed treaty to share everything. A big part of that was putting our weapons down. And since that day, our warriors, they put their weapons down. The harm that has been caused to our people and the land since then, the colonizers never put theirs down. It comes down to that spiritual sickness that I talk about, where greed and fear. There's a story about Chief Crowfoot, how he gave his own regalia off his back to a Mountie at the time, because this Mountie was looking real rough. And he said, "Here, take this." It was recently returned back to Nitsiskonakii. That just goes to show like how powerful and spiritually found our ancestors were. They truly wanted peace. They wanted no bloodshed. They wanted to work together. When you see nowadays, we are so poor and living in poverty on our own land. It's not sharing, That's it's oppression, systemically. So in order for there to be any type of reconciliation, there has to be truth. There has to be this. They have to give the land back to the true stewards of it, who actually cared and protected it for the 7 generations to come. Otherwise, we're going to continue down this path, which I know we're not. Like I said, there's a shift. And that's all has to do with, astronomy. There's a serious shift that's happening. The future is indigenous, part of my music. Indigenous rise. We see that in every aspect of this society, fashion, music, representation. Everyone wants to be Indian. NDN. Not our brothers in the East, but NDN. Everyone wants to be spiritually sound. They don't have, something I read in a book, Marie Baptiste, I think, is Reclaiming Indigenous Voice and Vision. But yeah, we're really lucky, especially as Blackfoots, to have what we have, our ceremonies, our language. You know, we still have our land in terms of reserves. But they say that, you know, we're a cure to a sick world, all indigenous peoples who still carry their traditions and, you know, their cultural ways of being. You know, everyone was indigenous at one point on Earth. I always call colonization, you know, it's like a entity. It's like a sick spirit itself. It's like, and it's spread rampant across the world. You know, in ways like, even like social media is like a way of colonizing your mind in terms of attention, because they've colonized the land, they've colonized so much things in that aspect. You know, now they're trying to, you know, they've colonized the way that we eat, the way that we, you know, drink water. We're buying water, and, you know, soon there'll be, it's almost like there will be air that you have to buy. Maybe I would like to say a prayer.
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
do.
because I'm still learning my language. You know, and in Blackfoot we would say, you know, get a matsin, see you later. Before that, you know, I would like to say this prayer that I learned. Ayawapasadoki, Spomokanan, Nakai Stisanan, Nakekimos Stisanan, Nakai Kakimasanan, Nakokmatosanan, Nakawato Itaksanan, Och Tokanan Apasadoki, Kimuskoko 6, Ixiki Matapsia, Gamotan, Nistoatsiman, Napiosin. Get matsin, and thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely.